So this is our first Enactus Talks event this year, and hopefully we will get off to a great start. So just to introduce the event and introduce a little bit about what we're trying to get out of this evening. We've been talking quite a lot on the board this year, number one, about building up our offering to the network, and for us in the Alumni, mentoring is a really important part of what we do within the Enactus Alumni, and we want to make sure that we sort of build up the professional development side as well, and hopefully have lots more talks and events like this which will build up the professional development offering that we have to give to you guys. So for those of you who don't know, the Enactus UK Alumni runs solely on volunteers, one of which who is the chair, Mike over there. Mike.
You turn around.
Just trying to throw everybody off.
But a couple of other board members in the room tonight, including Pete and myself. Am I missed anyone? No?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. But if you're interested in finding out more about how to get involved in what we do, then come and grab us and talk to us after the event. But in terms of what we want to get out of this evening in particular is that we want to talk to you guys about social and entrepreneurial careers. So just to get an idea of who's in the room, who in the room at the moment is in Enactus alumnus? Cool. Any current students? Couple. And anyone that doesn't really know what Enactus is? Okay, just checking. So what we're going to do is talk to you guys about careers, social careers, entrepreneurial careers. We're hopefully going to touch upon things like entrepreneurship, how to find your ways into entrepreneurial and social careers, and we've got an incredible panel here tonight to be able to do that, who come from a really wide and varied background. And sort of cover all of the different routes into getting into those social and entrepreneurial careers. So we've got a couple of people who have been on schemes like On Purpose in Year Here. People heard of those? Yeah, so you're kind of sort of structured schemes to find your way into those careers. Robbie, who runs Worthwhile, a similar scheme but for the third sector. And then we've got Lauren, that's been working in employer branding with sort of tech companies and startups, and Rob, who is the co-founder of Instant Impact, a recruitment agency that sort of work with startups and SMEs. So I won't talk for too much longer, but just to get the panel started, can I get you guys to just introduce more about yourselves, your backgrounds, what you do at the moment? Rob?
Yeah, so I'm Rob Blythe, nice to meet you guys. As Ran said, probably as well as I could, I run a company called Instant Impact. We do graduate careers in startups and scale-ups, so the idea is to take top talent away from your big corporates and provide an alternative option in the entrepreneurial side. So I'm very much for the entrepreneurial rather than the social today, although I like to think we are socially aware as a business. We're all about entrepreneurial companies, and our mission is to make them the first choice for top talent.
Hi there, I'm Alex Watson, and I'll just talk about two things because I'm here in two roles at the minute, or leading a double life. The first is I'm an associate on the On Purpose programme, so that is for people with a couple of years work experience. It then puts them in 2 6-month placements in social enterprises or social sector organisations. We also get training on Friday and mentors and coaches. Then the second thing is that I've set up my own company called Call the Crowd, and that's really drawing on what I did for a couple of years before On Purpose, which is helping people run crowdfunding campaigns. And I'm trying to work with bigger companies to let them use some of the ideas, the creative and also social enterprise ideas that are being crowdfunded, to kind of test them within their product innovation processes and test them via crowdfunding.
Hi, I'm Lauren, and I have been running 2 companies for the past 4 years. The most recent company was called Zealify. We helped high growth companies showcase what it was like to work there, and helped candidates understand day to day what they were going to be doing. I closed that company down about 3 months ago. I've now been contracting for a variety of startups, including an angel investment fund, I also run a blog where I profile successful female founders.
Hi, my name is Sarah Beckett. I'm also here in two capacities. So I'm an alumna of the Year Here programme. Year Here is a postgraduate programme in social innovation. So they take on graduates, but also people who are a few years into their career who are interested in social change. It's really hands-on and really sort of, you get a lot of personal development, and as a result, some of the people on the programme go on to run their own ventures. So while I was on Year Here, I started a social enterprise called Birdsong, which I'm running now, and it's an online retailer for clothing and jewellery made by women's organisations.
Hi everyone, my name is Robbie and I run an organisation called Worthwhile. So we are all about helping more young people start brilliant careers doing something socially oriented, and particularly with smaller and early stage social enterprises and charities. Our sense is there are lots of big problems in the world today, and we think everyone should be working on those for the majority of their working lives and not simply doing it in their spare time. And we think getting the right people into small organisations can really help those organisations to scale up as they go. So we're all about that.
So you guys are all clearly very entrepreneurial, having set up your own companies. But just to rewind back to when you guys graduated, what did you think that you would be doing, and how did you get to where you are now?
I graduated without really knowing exactly what I wanted to do, to be honest. So I'd done a couple of internships, one at a big investment bank in the city and another at a small managing consulting firm. Didn't feel particularly enamoured with the big corporate life and really enjoyed my time at the small managing consultancy. So wanted to find opportunities at smaller companies, found it quite challenging, to be honest. Most of them weren't really hiring or didn't seem to have any sort of graduate programme. So I went travelling with my best bud from uni, as most people seem to do after graduating. We got talking at the beginning of Go Travelling and just said we'd both love to run our own company at some point, and one thing led to another, and we basically agreed that we'd set up a company when we came back and said we'd do whatever our best idea was. Said no mortgage, no wife, no kids, no pressure, no risk, let's give it a crack. And Instant Impact was our best idea, kind of tying together our problem of not being able to find what we wanted to do with our networks at university, and it was our best idea, and here we are 5 years later, I guess.
Well, without sounding like a broken record, I also went so I went to the cheapest place there, spent as much time as I could without having to get a job. So I went to South America for 6 months. I did politics and economics degree, so my kind of instinct was to work in politics and civil service. So I did an internship in the embassy in Bolivia. Then when I came back, I worked for an MP, and then worked at the Treasury. But my advice, well, for me, it wasn't the right kind of environment. It wasn't creative enough. It was a bit soul destroying. There, in the Treasury, which there's some really fantastic people there, but they were basically just kind of spinning decisions that had already been taken by other politicians, rather than actually using what they had there to come up with new fantastic policies that could tackle some of the social problems out there. I think also for me, which is still the case, there's in the public sector there's simply, no matter what political party you look at, there's not the money to kind of begin big new programs that are going to tackle some of the real pressing issues that we have. And I thought, well, having done a little bit of research into social enterprise, I just thought that is a far sort of more interesting thing in the long term, which is trying to work with the market to ensure better social outcomes are delivered from that, which is why I kind of quit my job at the Treasury to run a grant funding programme for social enterprises.
So I have known from the age of about 7 that I wanted to run my own business. Although Zealify is my second official business, I have run about 100 in the course of my life so far. So I'd actually founded my business before I graduated, so about a month before we went to a hackathon up in Birmingham. No idea some idea loosely about business, no idea about technology at all. They started talking about Ruby on Rails. I thought it was a 90s band. It was all very embarrassing. But anyway, so I graduated and started straight away very much with that mentality of like I have no ties, like what was going to stop me, and I think that really helped. And actually looking back now, considering it didn't all work out, it's put me in a much better position than I ever would have been. I mean, the stuff that I get to work on now, I would have had no opportunity to do if I'd just followed the sort of traditional path.
For me, I never had any idea what I wanted to do. I've always been really impressed by people who know what they want to do, particularly people who know they want to start their own business. It's never something that I imagine myself doing. I studied languages, which is great, but it doesn't really lead you to an obvious career path. And I was a terrible student, and after uni I moved to Lisbon and became an English teacher, and I was sort of thinking that I wanted to do something social. When I moved back to London, I was working 2 days a week for a marketing company, and 2 days a week I was volunteering at a homeless shelter. And I hated my job in the marketing company, not because it was a bad company, it was just my job was so boring. And I really loved the stuff I was doing in the homeless shelter, so I realised that was kind of what I wanted to do, but I think knowing what there is in the social sector is really hard. So I thought I wanted to work for a charity, and then I thought maybe I wanted to work for an NGO, and then I decided I wanted to work for the UN. And then I found Year Here online, and it just seemed like everything that I needed without knowing I needed it. So there's a lot of personal development, a lot of different experiences. You sort of run your own projects, which I'd never been able to do before. So I immediately applied for that, and that's how I ended up doing what I do now.
So I'm the complete accidental entrepreneur. I never had any plans on setting something up. It just kind of happened. But when I left university, I think I knew I wanted to do something socially oriented and very similar. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but knew it was something social. I ended up talking to lots of people about it, and they all said the same thing. And it was, don't go and work for a charity. You'll be making coffee for 3 years and unemployable at the end of it. So that was kind of depressing, and that was Dublin when I graduated sort of 8 years ago. So I also went travelling for a while and worked in Liberia for a little bit. Came back, and then the financial crisis happened, so I realised maybe this advice of going to the private sector wasn't the worst advice in the world. So I went to work for Rolls-Royce for about 4 years. I think I knew going there it wasn't where I wanted to be long term, but it seemed like the best place to develop some kind of skills or knowledge about how to work. And I left about 3 years ago and came to do On Purpose. So yeah, great program for people with a few years experience who are looking to move into the social enterprise space. And it was on the back of one of the consulting projects I was doing there that the idea for Worthwhile came together, and it just kind of happened. And so yeah, we're going to go with that about 3 years.
So there was a PwC report that came out a couple of months ago, and they spoke to 2,000 recent graduates, and they asked them one of the questions was, what is the most important factor for you in your career when you think of a long-term career? And 76% of the respondents answered being able to make a social impact. So it's interesting because we talked a little bit about On Purpose in Year Here, and there's lots of other organisations like Escape the City and Worthwhile, etc. What do you think is different about our generation, and why do you think that sort of shift in wanting to do something social is happening? Anyone that wants to take it?
I can say, I think the generation is completely different to any other that's ever been into the workforce before. We have far more access to media as and when we want it. We're all far more aware of all of the careers that are possibly open to us, and are far more aware of the shortcomings of what we're doing. We're also by far and away the most impatient group of people who've ever been in the workforce. So whereas people used to go into any career and think, all right, I'm here for 30 years, I'll make the best of it. I'm at Rolls-Royce, I've got nowhere to move. And then now, as soon as people feel like they've come to their reasonable end of the life cycle within a role, they'll start looking elsewhere. And everyone wants to have their stamp, be that on creating a really cool entrepreneurial company and taking that to the next level, or socially impactful. I think tying those things together, I'm not surprised that so many people want to be able to look back at what they were able to achieve and say this was my impact on it, rather than I worked here for ages and I made a good pension.
Yeah, I think another sort of stat to throw in sort of backing up that really, LinkedIn looked at who are the 3 most in-demand employers, and the top 3 were Apple, Google, and Unilever. And obviously, Apple and Google you might expect, because they're pretty kind of magical tech companies. Unilever sell soap and washing powder, but actually do a really good job of projecting themselves as a company, and actually making themselves a company that's halving their carbon emissions within a decade. So I think that's another thing that backs that up for me, as well as agreeing with what you said. It's what I mentioned around disillusionment with political process. I think in previous generations people would look to tackle social problems by electing people to do that, and now they kind of don't see that as an option for one reason or another. I also think now in your work life, previously you'd go to your office or your factory and actually you'd be closed off from your social life, and you basically have to work. Now you can read the news, you can be emailing your mates, and I think that actually puts a big kind of, it means that companies have to make their work purposeful, otherwise their employees will get bored and spend time not doing work for that company, which I think is another factor in this, which is kind of driving some of this, needing to help people find impact in their work.
Absolutely. So I just want to pick up on the thing that you said about Unilever. You may have noticed a couple of nodding heads in the room. So Unilever are an Enactus UK sponsor, and have sort of a really strong focus on very ethical supply chains, and also that culture of entrepreneurship. So sort of based on your experience, Robbie, of working with Rolls-Royce, how effective do you think the idea of entrepreneurship being able to make that change from within a big organisation is?
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting movement in general. If you look at the shape of the world today, so much of what happens is dominated by big companies. And while my personal sort of journey has been to go and set something up myself, I think the biggest change is going to come from some of those big corporates, and when they really do get serious about what's happening there, that's where we're going to see the kind of systemic change that we need to see happening. It's a long and hard journey internally, and these things are slow moving, and there's incredible barriers internally in some of these places to stop things from happening. But for those people who are in a position to stick with it and fight the good fight with that, it's an incredibly valuable thing to be doing.
So, Rob and Lauren, one of the things that you guys both mentioned is that you kind of knew that you wanted to set up your own company, and then you guys sort of went on purpose and you're here, and I guess what did you gain from going onto programs like that, and how they sort of shaped your career path now?
For me, I definitely wouldn't be running Birdsong if I hadn't done Year. I could never have imagined starting my own business. The word business made me feel a bit sick, I think, for a long time. And Year just firstly, they make you do so much stuff that you're uncomfortable with. So you have to do public speaking, you've got to run your own projects. They don't really give you time to think or prepare very hard, and that helps you a lot to kind of realise that you can do all these things and you can kind of do stuff without knowing everything about it or without having loads of experience. And I think that's been crucial for me and my co-founder in running our own business. And also it kind of enabled us to see the potential problems and how we might go about solving such small parts of them. So they expose you to a lot of different kind of social issues and what people are doing to tackle them. And it helps you to, because you say you want to do something in social change, but that's huge. There's so many things you could do. There's a vast number of problems which are incredibly hard to fix. But once you have the opportunity to see, there's a small problem here, there's an opportunity to do something, then that's when you can kind of get excited and get the ball rolling, I think.
Yeah, for me, one of the big things that I've got out of it is the ability to work in a bit more of a structured way and learn some of the, in a sense, the wicked ways of the private sector. So one of the founders of On Purpose worked at McKinsey for a long time, so a lot of the kind of curriculum that they have in their trainings is helping you, do problem solving their way, do a deck their way. And whilst that's not always the best way, it's often how senior people are kind of used to communicating. So for me, that's been super helpful. And I also think, actually to some of your experience, that spending time in a consultancy is not the worst thing to do. I think as long as you don't go into that, thinking that you need to live the lifestyle that everyone in that consultancy is living, which might be the cars, it might be the hours, but I think in terms of some of the skills that you learn and exposure to different types of businesses, it's a really good option, and certainly something that's helped me retrospectively actually via On Purpose. I think the other thing as well for me is a lot of my mates from uni who I hang around with, they're kind of corporate lawyers and civil servants, and so actually just to have a network of mates really who are kind of working in a similar space is really helpful, and hopefully that's what Enactus gives you guys as well. So yeah.
So there's really strong element of trial by error in everything that you guys have said, and sort of figuring it out as you go along. But if you could go back to your graduate self and give yourself one piece of career advice, what would it be?
I think take your time. You've got so much time ahead of you when you graduate. You can work out what you want to do, and the first thing you jump into doesn't necessarily have to be the thing that you're stuck in forever. Whatever it is, it will be a useful experience, even if it tells you that what it is you were doing is not the thing that you want to be doing. That's valuable, and if you learn how to create a pitch deck or learn how to communicate with senior members of staff, then that's really useful in itself. I think just taking your time to work out exactly what it is that you want to do, and whether that's set up your own business, then great, and just be aware that you're going to learn from your own mistakes, but that's one of the most powerful ways to learn. And if it's that you want to go into the social sector, it doesn't necessarily need to be immediately straight away, and there are actually lots of different routes and lots of different ways to skin a cat. So I'd say take your time, look at what's out there in the market, both short term and long term, and then just go for whatever seems best to you straight away, and then you can tailor your approach and go with lean startup style.
I think my advice would be to just try and ask yourself, when you're in whatever jobs you end up in, are you kind of learning what you want from that, and don't necessarily think about your first 10 years out there in the labour market as when you're going to actually do something, or land in your final destination, but just see it as am I equipping myself with skills for doing stuff that I want to in the future.
So there's two parts of this for me. One, the piece of advice I give to myself would be that I know nothing at that point, and I should be quite honest that I know absolutely nothing, whereas I was less so when I graduated. Bordering on obnoxious. And then the second part is from what we've seen working at Zealify and talking to graduates. They have this, and it's sort of to echo your point, there's this sense of permanence, and actually it's just not, like, you can quit your job, that is okay. Like, I talk to so many people like, oh, what if I start there and I don't like it? Well, just leave. Like, that's a thing people do, like, you can just leave your job. That's okay. Whereas this like mindset where like, no, I've got to work there like 3 years, even though I've started, I've got to get that like tick in the box. It's like, no, just like do what you enjoy and don't ever stop doing that.
For me, I think it would be they always say this thing on year here, which is everyone's winging it all the time. So I think it can be really hard when you graduate, because you feel like you're like definitely at the bottom of the pile, and you have to kind of convince people to let you work for them for free, which is not very good for like your and it kind of feels like no one, like I know when I started Birdsong, me and Sophie, my co-founder, we definitely felt like no one would ever take us seriously, because we've been running this thing for like 2 weeks, and you have to bring people and say you're ringing in from this social enterprise, and like it seems like a joke in your head. And you think no one will take you seriously and they'll sort of laugh you out the room, but they don't. And you kind of realise that even though you feel like you're winging it sometimes, a lot of people are winging it and make careers out of winging it. And actually you don't need to be as scared as you sometimes feel, and yeah, just give it a go basically.
I think I'd build on the advice of, do what you enjoy, and maybe go a step further and say don't have any preconceptions about what you're going to enjoy. There's a number of jobs that I've lined up thinking, I'm going to love this, and got in there and absolutely hated it, and other ones I've been given that I've been absolutely dreading and have turned out to be the best thing ever, but completely lost count of. So I think just kind of throwing yourself into lots of things, the sort of lean idea of running lots of mini experiments with different career paths or different things you could take, and constantly reflecting and asking, what am I enjoying about this, what am I not enjoying about this, and what does that mean for what I should try next. Just kind of relax into it.
So Lauren, I just want to pick up on the thing that you said about accepting that when you graduated you probably didn't know very much. Because I think there's myself included and probably a couple in the room that would definitely echo that sentiment. But so you're sort of actively job hunting at the moment.
Yeah.
How have you changed your approach to job hunting and finding a job this time around?
I mean, so it's been slightly different because I've been running my business for 4 years. I've built up a incredible network. So actually I've been very lucky. This is going to sound like some horrible humble brag. I've been very lucky that I've actually not applied for any jobs, so I've just been interviewing people I know. But it's become more like a conversation because I actually have stuff to talk about now. Whereas when I graduated, I had nothing to talk about. I convinced myself I had, and it's like, when have you managed a team that's been really challenging? It's like, never, I've never done it. But I'm going to lie to you and tell you that I have, so that's fine. But I think it is acknowledging that, people are so keen to claim that they've done all this stuff, and there will be amazing stuff that you've done. And, I'm not taking away from that, but there's also so much stuff you just don't know, and that, and that you shouldn't be afraid to ask. Looking back at myself graduating, seem very proud to not admit that I just didn't know anything. I mean, I'm sitting at a hackathon thinking I'm hearing out some 90s band. They're talking about angels and VCs, and I'm like, why are they talking about vice chancellors? What's going on? And it's like, but I didn't have that courage to go and ask people, and actually that would have started my learning and development far sooner if I'd have bothered to actually go and ask those questions than sitting and thinking, I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm going to have to smile and pretend that I do. So, and I think that's a really big thing, we've all sort of talked about failing and not failing, but overcoming hurdles. And I think for me, that's been a really big part of my learning, is understanding that actually falling down and not doing very well, it might seem awful at the time, but there's some amazing stuff that can come out of it.
Picking up on something from there, I think very few grads I've ever spoken to have realised that the interview process is a two-way street. It's as much about you finding out about that business and whether you want to work with those people as it is about them finding out about you, and keenness to impress. Sometimes if they don't want you, then great, you don't want them. You sometimes do just need to think about, actually, is this the right culture for me? Is this the right company? Is this the right social enterprise? Do I really believe in the mission? Is it the sort of company that actually going to train me and give me skills that are going to help me with my further career? And if the answer to some of those questions is no, then maybe it's not the right place for you in the first place. Don't always feel like you need to impress the whole time.
Yeah.
And I was exactly the same. I can say I know everything. That's why we both started up a business straight away. Because, in reality, you don't. You need to ask a lot of people for advice, and then sometimes the advice needs to stop, and you just need to throw yourself in there and see what happens. And failure is a word that our company, we're really big on owning. Failure happens the whole time. Everyone fails at stuff all the time, and it really doesn't matter at all. You just got to make failure a positive thing and learn from it, get constructive feedback, and move on to the next bigger and better thing.
I mean, I do think there's really something in that pushing back side of it. I think so I'm 7 interviews into one company right now. So it's extreme stuff. And the biggest thing that I've got out of that process is actually I've pushed back a lot in the conversations. I've said, I'm not sure this part of your business is going to work, or why are you moving into this vertical? I don't understand. And we noticed at Zealify, a lot of candidates wouldn't ask those awkward questions, but your employer is going to respect you more, or the prospective employer is going to respect you more if you actually bother to get a bit uncomfortable with them.
As long as they're relevant questions.
Oh yeah, God, don't ask something ridiculous. Recently I've been talking to people who've just been asking random questions about Brexit, and it's just because you understand the topic doesn't mean you need to talk about it in the
I think what I would say is, the ability to pick things up quickly and have enthusiasm for what they're doing is, just invaluable and might mean that you're better than a lot of the more senior people in that organisation. You know, the first person I hired had basically no work experience, and we turned down someone who had about 7 years of work experience. But she was amazing, and she was probably better than you know, a third of the people in that office at least, because you know, she was just willing to like pick up new skills very quickly and would not mess about and was dedicated to what we were doing. So I just, yeah, those are the skills that, for me, you know, if you haven't got the track record, get those across, and you know, people should go for it.
So I completely agree with all of those things, but we'd also say that it takes a certain level of self-awareness and confidence to be able to push back in interviews and to be able to ask the right questions. What advice would you give to everyone in the room in terms of how you go about building that self-awareness and building that confidence?
Practice
Yeah,
is a great place to start.
yeah.
Maybe chuck yourself in for a couple of interviews that you're not dying to get the job. If you have a few interviews where you're not quite so nervous about the outcome because you maybe don't want the role quite as much, then that's going to leave you in a pretty good position. Put yourself in front of your friends, family, etc. My youngest brother ran what I think is the perfect graduate job search, and he spent 2 weeks without applying to anything, researching exactly what he wanted to do, and he decided he wanted to work at a PPC agency, then listed all of the companies that he wanted to work for and ranked them all in terms of his preference based on what he could find on the web. He then applied to one which was down outside the top 6 first off, and got himself in the mix, had a bit of experience applying there, and then he applied to his top 5, and ultimately, again bragging for my brother, I don't know why I'm doing that. he got 5 offers because he'd spent the time to actually research, spent the time to realise he had no PPC experience. He'd worked for his older brother in a job that he had no interview practice for whatsoever. If you can spend a bit of time, work out what your key skills are, and you were talking about get up and go, it's amazing how often you hear any company say all we want is someone with get up and go, drive, thrust. No grad really has years and years worth of experience because we're all graduates, right? So anyone who's saying anything else is lying, and you can see through that quite quickly. And if you can just present yourself as someone who can pick up new skills, get on with it, get stuck in, isn't scared of a bit of hard graft, then you'll get there. I can't remember the initial question, but
And I think there's something to be said for networking as well. Like networking, especially when you go on your own, puts you in such an uncomfortable situation that you have to learn to be quite confident quite quickly. And you have to learn these social skills to engage with other people. Not only that, but it also provides you with opportunities as well. Like, you know, I want, touch wood, to go through my life without ever having to apply for a job. That's like my ultimate goal, and I want to do that because I want to network all the time. Like, I like meeting people, I like, you know, going out and chatting to people. I didn't used to be like that. I used to be the person that stood in a room and get really drunk and be like, God, I just don't want to be here and I'm really uncomfortable. But it takes that moment to throw yourself out there and go on your own without your friends and don't have that buffer. But you'll meet people and you'll get chatting, and then opportunities will arise through those conversations. And then when you come to an interview, you are having a conversation. You're not having an interview.
I think what you were saying about self-awareness, I think is really true. I think it's really hard sometimes to know what you are and aren't good at, besides what you sort of knew from like uni and school, and like knowing your ways of working and stuff. I've found that stuff really hard to work out. But those are like, if you know those things about yourself, that's what's really impressive, and that's what people can really like cling on to about you in an interview. So I think like get people to help you with it, like get people who know you really well to tell you what they think you're good and bad at, and you might disagree, but then you know that about yourself. You know that you don't agree on that point, and actually you can like work out much easier what you do think. I think definitely other best people help you with that if you can't work it out.
So training is obviously a huge part of what I and I've been lucky enough to sit in on some of it, and definitely I would say really helps with that self-awareness and that confidence building in your experience. And what kind of training have you found worthwhile grads to be really receptive to, and in terms of sort of self-improvement, what sort of training do you think is really effective?
Sure. So going back, I think So I worked in HR at Rolls-Royce and came in on a graduate, leadership program kind of setup, and had lots of structured training as part of that. And I guess I've noticed a couple of things as part of that. Firstly, big companies spend a lot of time and a lot of money on graduate recruitment and getting out there, and then when graduates come in making it a real experience. And I had a very positive experience on the whole at Rolls-Royce. I learned lots, I was challenged lots, and I grew lots as part of what they were doing. But the thing I found interesting was that they spent a lot of money on stuff, and none of that was particularly helpful. And all the stuff that was really helpful didn't cost very much at all. And the things that were really helpful there were consistently being given a job that was bigger than anything that I'd done before, and having someone senior to kind of back up on that. Having a structured training curriculum and someone say, right, over the first 2 years, these are the things that you need to sit in on and learn about. And even if they're not immediately relevant to what you're doing, knowing about these things is going to help you over the first few years of your career. And then thirdly, having a sort of senior mentor and someone sit down every couple of months and tell me all of my ideas about career progression were rubbish and start again and think about things differently. And I guess that's a lot of what we're going to do at Worthwhile. So our sense is, this idea of learning is sort of a 70-20-10 ratio, that 70% of your learning comes on the job, 20% is from good relationships with managers and more senior peers, and 10% is classroom learning. So while the classroom stuff is important in itself, it's actually that self-awareness piece that we think is more important, and always being able to take something that you learn in an abstract setting back to work and be able to put it into practice quite quickly. And I think sort of similar to year here, and it's really great, coming from my position of real frustration and not being able to see opportunities in the social sector a few years ago, seeing the likes of you here around at the moment, Charity Works, Worthwhile, I hope fits in that space as well, and on purpose then a little bit further down the line, but just programs that give you the structure to reflect and think about where you're going and what you're looking for. They're never comfortable conversations to have with yourself, but they're the kind of things that if you do them right will make a huge difference in both the confidence in where you're going and also your ability to get there.
I mean, two tips. One you probably won't take, but in terms of this confidence and awareness piece. So one from my first ever boss was I was going for some interviews. She said, get someone to interview you and film it and watch it back, because you are your own sort of biggest critic. And there I was being interviewed by my mum, and I wasn't even looking her in the eyes. And so I think that's the first thing, because then you kind of you know that to give all the right answers is only half the job. It's probably less than half the job. You actually need to give the right answers and be very engaging and polite and sort of enthusiastic to them. So definitely do that. The other bit of advice, so I was working at this place and this guy was encouraging me to go on the prison graduate recruitment fast stream, and I said, I'm alright, I don't really want to work in a prison place. But there was, he said, and he sort of wedged me to go and do it, which was a volunteer program going into your local prison. Every single prison in the UK has this, and I was on a board, mostly with retired people, but that was anyway. The experience that I got from that was walking around a prison on my own with my keys, and if I have the confidence to go up and talk to prisoners about their complaints and their beefs, then I'm not really going to be too frightened about an interview that I have. And honestly, so it might not be a prison that you put yourself in, but certainly put yourself into context where you are uncomfortable and you can draw on that experience further down the line.
So one more question before sort of open up to the audience, but a lot of what we've been talking about today is about getting access to those opportunities. Like, we know the jobs in startups and SMEs and social organisations are out there, and it takes a while to figure out how to actually get them. So starting with Rob and Lauren, in your experience sort of connecting graduates to jobs in startups and scale-ups, what advice would you give to graduates trying to get into those spaces, and also Robbie, the same but for the social sector?
I think as Lauren will say as well, there are some fantastic things about working at startup scale-ups and social enterprises as well, but there are also some downsides. You won't have as structured a scheme as you would at Rolls-Royce, and the training won't be quite so well put together because there aren't as many people, and there are frankly bigger things on at the minute than writing loads of training courses. So I think the biggest piece of advice for anyone going into an organisation like that is to really take control of what you want and just ask for things. If you say, oh, I've noticed that we're not doing that much here and I'd be really interested in getting involved, pretty much the only answer you'll get in an organisation like that is, awesome, that's amazing, that's off my plate, can you please give me back some ideas and let's move forward with it. So I think when you've got a very structured scheme, you should take back and kind of take everything you can from it and stick your hand up for as many of the different opportunities you've got available. When you're at a startup or scale up, you've got to make your own opportunities for yourself. You've got to stick yourself in there and I guess create work where it doesn't exist already. That's how you progress, that's how you stand out. And when we were saying get up and go before, that's really the number one asset for anyone working in those sort of companies, and how you can move really quickly through and gain responsibility far faster than you can elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think I'd echo that point. Startups aren't for everyone, and it looks very fashionable and very cool, but it is really hard work, and some people don't enjoy it, and some people really like structure, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to work at a corporate. Obviously it's not for us, but it's for other people. And I just think acknowledging that is really important, because you can put yourself in a situation where you're more than uncomfortable, you're just in the wrong place. And I think identifying that with yourself is really crucial. And secondly, actually, in sectors where there is no job board that's really focused on it, or no assets out there to help you find it, recruiters are your friend. And that's probably the first and last time I'll ever say that phrase. Yeah, these guys. But the point is, find one, come with a mission, what do you want to achieve, what type of place do you want to work? Obviously be flexible with it, you don't really know, but have an idea in your mind so you can have a realistic conversation, and find someone who wants to listen to you and work with you, because you might end up coming back to that person, and if they're talented, they're going to want that as well as a recruiter. So in sectors where you don't know what's out there, I do actually think it's really important to not shy away from getting in touch with recruiters and getting engaged with them, because they have opportunities you'll probably never find out about online, and that will never make it to a job board. And then obviously my last point is always network. That's been my motto from day one. You should just be chatting to as many people as possible, because you don't know who knows, someone's mate who works at somewhere you really want to work, and they can get you in the door. And that's some of the best connections that you can get, is just having these really honest conversations. And I think it's funny, because I talk about this every time I do a panel, and I always if I come back and do another panel, I always talk to people, I'm like, oh, have you gone out and networked? And usually the answer is no, because people do get really uncomfortable and really worried about it. But don't panic, and once you've done it once, it does get a bit easier.
Oh, sorry. I think, it's kind of echoing what you guys have said already, but if you want to work in a startup, you basically have to be a generalist, because the teams are really small and people have roles, but everyone does a little bit of everyone else's work. And it's really helpful to have people who can jump in and help. For example, we've had this amazing girl working for us for the last 4 months, and at the beginning we found it really hard to give her jobs, because we were so used to doing everything ourselves. But she was so good at being oh, do you want me to do that? And we were oh, actually, yeah, I really want you to do that. And she ended up doing our accounts one month, which we felt so bad about, because we were can't get to do accounts. But she was really cool. She was no, it's fine. So those kind of people who are amazing, and if you can be one of those people, then startup, you'll be great in startup.
I think I'd make a similar point on networking and initiative again. I think if I was, one of your previous questions, giving myself advice when I was leaving, everything I did was through the front door, and it was a financial crisis, so I probably sent 100 job applications and got about 2 interviews from it. So sometimes that front door is not the most effective way. And so just seeing it from the other side now, we've had 600 applications for Worthwhile this year, and there's 2 of us in the team, so you just don't have all the time in the world to really think about every candidate in detail and give them the time and justice that application probably deserves. Whereas, like you say, the single biggest thing in a startup is someone who has the initiative to go and make things happen. And if someone is contacting me about an application they've submitted, it immediately shows they've taken the time to look at who I am, figure out what my email address is, send an email. It's a lot of positive signals straight away, and it's the kind of thing that more often than not moves people into a yes pile when it comes to actual decision making. Or indeed, if I know of a friend who's looking for someone, I can, it takes 30 seconds to send their CV on, so just don't
open yourself up to so many emails.
Cool. So, shall we have some questions from the room? Chris?
Hi everyone. So, hi. So it's one of my best mates' birthdays today, which is kind of provides a bit of a reaffirmation that we're all getting older. A lot of the older alumni, in particular, we're kind of we're not as young as we used to be straight out of uni. You guys are kind of the conscious are quite young yourselves. The whole startup entrepreneur space, obviously getting into it, saying you're going to start joining one, takes on a huge amount of risk. And when you get to that age where you have to learn to adult and get a mortgage and family, whatever, it's incredibly difficult to do. In your experience, do you think it's very much a young person's game getting into it? Or do you think something that someone who's a little older, has the commitments, can deal with it at the plunge? And how do those people deal with it? If we know, I'm in a corporate career, I may at the end of it want to go into the startup world. Like, how do you get people to take that risk when they've got so much to commit to?
So, I mean, I think there's two sides to it. I don't think it is a young person's game. Like, I watch so many more young people fail because they don't know what the hell they're doing. That's been your experience. But I think also there's something to be said for the different type of businesses that people build. So, when you've had a career, typically you then move into something that's sector related. You're often quite heavily networked, so you're more likely to get funding easier. People often do it as a side project or something in their spare time. And that typically works quite well for those type of things. And then you can make a really educated decision about when to take the leap. Like, when is it right? You can test it in a very different way. Like, and I think actually those businesses sometimes work better because you've given yourself that time. You've probably taken a little bit longer than someone like me who's just like running in at full pace. But you've sort of stepped back and said, yeah, I'm taking a lot of risk, so it's got to be relatively right. And I think that works very well. And depending what background you come from, having that domain expertise, if you go out for funding or if you are engaging clients, that really helps. So, I think there's definitely something to be said. Obviously, we are like younger entrepreneurs, but there is definitely something to be said for having that domain expertise and that experience before you set up as well.
I think access to capital is the best it's ever been. I think it is, relatively speaking, there are so many routes to get your idea funded, and whether it's VC, angels, people people from your network already, that actually if you can get the initial idea off the ground, prove concept, do it alongside what you're doing already in the corporate world, and then push out for funding, I think it's really not